Okay. I'm live here today with Kevin Benson, and I'm so excited because I haven't seen him in like 3 years or something. It's been a while. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah.
And Kevin was my first business coach. And at the time, I never had a business coach. I didn't know what a business coach was or why I needed one. I just had a mentor say, you need a business coach. So, and I had met you, I think, at the Landmark seminar.
Yeah, I think that's right. We met at
Yeah.
a seminar or something. Because, we
Yeah.
have a mutual coaching friend in common. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you spoke at NABO. And I think that's when I was like, hey, I think, I'd like to work with you. So
That's right.
yeah. And my favorite thing that you taught me was some of these principles of improv.
hmm
And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But why don't you introduce yourself a little bit
Sure.
about your background and what you do?
Yeah, you bet. So, my name's Kevin Benson. I own a company called Bold Move Consulting and Coaching. I'm doing business coaching and consulting for my focus right now is mission-driven organizations, so nonprofits or religious organizations, things like that. So I do leadership consulting and coaching for organizations like that, and then also one-on-one coaching and consulting, which is how we met.
Mhm.
My background is in kind of those mission-driven fields. So I have a 25-year background in nonprofits and nonprofit fundraising and leadership. But one of my hobbies for most of my adult life has been performing and teaching about improv and improv comedy. And about a few years ago, I started to integrate some of the ideas from improv and improv comedy into kind of business coaching and consulting and things like that. So now my coaching and consulting is influenced by different aspects of improvisation and improvisational comedy. And I work with creative entrepreneurs who want to kind of up their game in that way. So
Cool. I love it. It's so unique. I've never heard of anyone else doing that. So I think it's really cool. So probably one of the most important things, or the thing I remember most that you taught me, was it's okay to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And you had me like announce my failure and take a bow, and like you clapped for me and stuff.
Right.
It seems so weird. Like I've always been this like type A person in my life, like straight A's. And I think I realized I only tried things that I knew I would be good at.
Right.
Because I didn't want to fail,
Right.
And so in business, you have to take risks in order to move forward. And so to learn, it's okay to try something and have it not work and actually celebrate it and be like, okay, like not feel bad about it. That's probably the most important thing you taught me at that point in my business. So how is that a principle of improv that
great question. So improv in general is just the idea that you go out on stage or you go out with a group of people and you just make something up that has never been done before. There's no script. There might be a prompt or some ideas, but you just go out and do something, and you do something that's never been there, right? That's what business owners are doing all the time. Like with the products that we create or the services that you're selling, like you're doing something that's never been done before. You might be doing a product or service that someone else does, but it's yours. And so it's never been done this way, right? So the idea in improv is you're not going to get it right every single time. You're not going to hit a home run every single time you step up on that stage and try something. But the key to that is the consistency with which you show up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talk a lot about this too in entrepreneurial ventures and things like that, is you have to keep showing up every day.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I learned from improv is there's a few different ways that we approach fear and failure. One of them is we do everything that we can to minimize the amount of fear or failure that we're going to feel, right? So we do things that are comfortable, or we do the same thing that we know is going to work. Or you can approach fear and failure like it's just going to be part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have an offering that people don't buy. You're going to have maybe an event that it just doesn't really work out for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. In improv, we teach this idea that if you can celebrate and acknowledge the failure and continue to move on, you're doing great. Like you're doing better than a lot of other people. So we do this exercise in improv, and it's the one that I shared with you, where you actually say out loud, you acknowledge, hey, here's something that I failed at. And it could be something as simple as like, I had a really crappy time parallel parking my car a couple of weeks ago, or it can be something like pretty meaningful. Like I put a new offering out for my business, or I tried a new service and nobody bought it. Mm-hmm. Acknowledging that you took the risk and acknowledging the outcome and just saying, I tried this thing and it didn't work. I failed. Thank you very much. It just allows you to like name it and claim it, right? Mm-hmm. Like I tried something and it didn't work.
Right.
And the more that you do that, the more you get comfortable with taking risks, and the more you get comfortable with things working and not working, the closer you get to everything working out. Mm-hmm. There's something that we do as human beings, I think, and especially as entrepreneurs or business owners, where we will work right up into the edge of having something that is a risk or a breakdown, and then we'll pull back. Mm-hmm. So I had a coach tell me recently, like, there's a difference between working to have a breakthrough in your business and working to avoid having a breakdown. Right? Like, so, and sometimes having a breakthrough requires you to try something you've never tried before or do something you've never done, and that might not work.
Right.
So getting yourself comfortable with this idea of failure is fundamental to improv. I've been doing improv for, almost all of my adult life, almost 30 years now. And still a lot of what I do in rehearsal and practice doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the process. It's just part of the process.
So if you're on stage and you say something, like what would be considered a failure in improv, I guess? Is it if the audience doesn't laugh, or like what's a failure? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So
standpoint.
Right. Yeah. Oftentimes what you're trying to do in improv is you're trying to really just get on the same page with the people that you're performing with, have a good understanding of what ideas you're creating, or, moving in the same direction. A failure might be if you come on stage and say, "Oh, it's really hot today." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? We're at the North Pole. It's freezing." Well, I didn't, that didn't work because I wasn't paying attention maybe, or I didn't hear you or whatever. It's a lot of people think that improv is supposed to be funny and the audience is supposed to laugh all the time. And that's, somewhat true. It's if the audience is laughing and having a good time, you're probably doing a good job. But 90% of doing improv with people around you is figuring out where you're all going to go together. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think in that way, it's actually similar to, I'm going to get a little marketing on you, but like that's similar to a customer or a client, right? Mm-hmm. Like you just want to figure out where we're trying to go together.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't have those connections, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. It's not going to work. Right. And in improv, we practice trying to figure out where we're all going together. Mm-hmm. So it's a failure if you don't know where you're going. And once you do, then you figure, we know what we're doing.
Right. So. Yeah. I think that's a good principle we could apply to sales calls. Like I used to be so afraid of getting on the phone with someone and like talking about what I offer and stuff. But I've learned to just get on the phone and just ask them questions. Yeah. And the same thing, like trying to understand what they want. And then if it's something I can help them with, just tell them this is how I can help you. Is that something you need to do? So now it's not so scary. It's just having a conversation. So
I'm going to ask you a question. What changed that for you? Like how did you transform the way you were about sales calls to being like, I didn't really like to do it, to someone who's just like, I'm really curious now and ask lots of questions? How did that transform for you?
Well, I have had a lot of coaches and taken some classes on sales. I think I took a class from the sales maven, Nikki Raish. I've taken several workshops from her, and then she had a class where she actually sent us a notebook with all these like actual scripts. Like someone says this, say this, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that really helped me just have some confidence and like to know what to say. Cause I just, at first didn't really know what to say. Right. And then just doing it, I think, like I was scared to get on the phone, but I just did it. It wasn't too bad. Even if they said no. I think that was another thing too, is letting go of the meaning behind a no, like taking it personally. Like, oh, they didn't hire me. Like, well, wasn't the right fit for them for now, or whatever. So I think that's probably the major one. Just letting go of that. Be like, having a conversation. If they say no, it's totally fine.
Well, and that's the idea behind, being at a place where you're either like avoiding a breakdown rather than having a breakthrough. Right. Yeah. A really easy way to avoid a breakdown is to not have a sales call. Like, don't get on the phone.
Yep.
You won't have to get a no that way, right?
Yeah.
Super great.
Yeah.
But you also won't have that opportunity to share your product or your service and then kind of break through to that yes.
Right.
So now I'm just going to start talking because
Okay.
but it reminds me of this idea in improv about if you know improv at all, you've probably heard this concept of yes and.
Mhm.
And yes and is this idea where you kind of accept what's being offered to you and then you kind of build on it.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I like to kind of give a little caveat to that is accepting something is not the same thing as agreeing with something,
Mhm.
right? So if you put that on like a sales call or a conversation with a client, I can be totally fine accepting that you don't want to hire me or that, it's not the right time. I don't agree with you because actually I think I'm great at what I do and I think I'd be perfect for you. You don't, that's fine. I can accept that. So acceptance does not equal agreement necessarily, right? That's an improv concept. That's a yes and concept. That's a concept that can say, oh, okay, I know where you're going, client or customer, and I don't, I wouldn't go there because I think I'm the best at what I do and I think you should hire me. But I got it, and I got what you're saying and I accept that and I can move on. That I think is that's a key to like sales calls or pitches to clients. What would it be like if we do these exercises sometimes where it's like, go out and get 10 no's, right?
Yeah.
What if instead it was just like, what if you were okay with everything that a potential client or customer said to you today on the phone? Everything that they said is just fine. I'm accepting all of it, right? That's an improv concept that I can think be really powerful for people too.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. I forgot to mention, if anyone has any questions, post them in the comments or let us know you're here. I think it's weird to be talking to, the air. Right. We do these live streams. So post a comment, let us know you're here, where you're from, and if you have any questions as we go. Yeah. So what are some other principles of improv that you want to share with us?
Yeah. So the idea of yes and is one of kind of foundational, but another one is this idea of building trust with one another. So in improv, if you're going to do something together, you have to trust each other. You have to trust that each other is going to have your best interest in mind. Really, at the end of the day, you have to trust that the person you are working with or talking to is not going to hurt you or make you look bad, right? That is exactly what it's like when you're hiring a service provider or hiring someone to do some creative work for you. Right. Every single person that sells something, your client or customer wants to make sure that you are not going to hurt them, whatever that means, and you're going to make them look good, right? So in improv, the way you build trust is there's this kind of mathematical formula. You've got a few things that you add together. Credibility. So how many times have we done something and you have been credible? So you do what you say you're going to do, you deliver things on time. And then empathy or intimacy. How much? So that's this top line, credibility plus empathy. How much do you get? How important this is to me? How much do you get that this is a big deal? So then the model, either the mathematical formula is credibility and empathy divided by risk. How much risk are you asking me to take? How much does it cost? How much of myself how much of my business am I putting into your hands?
Right.
In improv, are you going to embarrass me? Are you going to make me look bad? Are you going to make me, feel bad in front of this group of people? So if you can get these things where the level of risk is acceptable or proportionate to the level of credibility or empathy you have, then that is a way to win this kind of equation of trust. Right. In improv, you build credibility by making sure every time you're on stage, you take care of the people that you're working with. You make sure that they're safe, whatever that means to them. And you build empathy by helping to understand what their ideas are and where they're coming from. The more, and here's the magic of this little formula, the more credibility and empathy you build, the lower the risk is for that person that you're working with.
Right.
In the same way it's true in business. You're a photographer and a coach, and the more photos you take, the more sessions you have, the more credibility and empathy that you get, and the more work that you put out there, the lower my risk is for hiring you because I know how good you are. I know the work that you do, right? So trust is one of those things that has to be established in improv. So when I'm coaching people about sales or when I'm coaching people about how to build the business, one of the first questions is, what level of risk are you asking your clients to take? right? If you show up and I don't know what you do, maybe you've just hung out your shingle and you're just getting started and you're like $10,000 per session or $10,000 per package. I'm like, I don't know. That's a level of risk for me that I might not be willing to take because you and I don't have that credibility or empathy yet, right?
Right.
As opposed to a brand that is established or a service provider that is established over time, where I can say, I know this person's credible. I know this person gets where I'm coming from, and I'm willing to take that level of risk. I'm willing to pay $10,000 for a package because they have that credibility risk. So trust is the foundational part of that. So sometimes people ask me, how do I build that as an entrepreneur, right? Like, I'm not an improviser. I can't go on stage with my clients. And I said, there's two things. One is you have to acknowledge the discomfort, right? Like, you've never hired me before and you're maybe not sure about how this is going to go. I acknowledge that you're taking a risk. Got it. And you practice trust with that client or that person over and over again, right? So if you say you're going to deliver something on time, deliver it on time. And if you can't, you tell them what's going on, right? If you say things are going to cost something, then you make it, you honor that price, right? Honor that cost. So acknowledging the discomfort, it's not comfortable to give people your money, right? Yeah. It's not comfortable to hire service providers or to give people your money. It's uncomfortable. The more comfortable you can make people doing that, the more sales you're going to make and the more your brand is going to be built. And the more that you can practice trust with your clients, I think, trust begets trust. Right. And we know this, like it's this old wives' tale that you do business with people that you know. That's totally true. Yep. Like the guy who's been cutting my hair has been cutting my hair for 1,000,000 years. I'm going to tell you, I don't know if he's the best barber in town. I don't. But I know that he cuts my hair the way that I like him to cut it. And he's going to cut my hair for as long as he wants because I trust him. Right. Exactly. Same with service providers, coaches, photographers, designers, all those things. You know who you know because you've built that trust with them. So that's a foundational improv thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually one of my major priorities in my business has been to nurture relationships with my past clients because they already trust me. They got the result that they wanted. And a lot of people hire me over and over again because of that. So, but all of the things you talked about, showing up on time for your meetings, being dressed well, I think, like showing up in a way that makes you look trustworthy, have amazing photos on your website, all those things, like that, foster trust before they even meet you. That's a big part of what I do for people, actually.
Absolutely. So, yeah,
I love that one.
And things like photos. I mean, I tell people this all the time. Like, you took the last time I had my photos done by you was like probably 4.5, 5 years ago. Right. Like I've got less and more gray hair now, so it's time to get some updates. But like, I still use those photos. I still use some of those images that we created years ago, and for whatever reason, I haven't updated them. Like a lot of, I think, creative business owners, it's one of those things that we need to get around to. Yeah. But the one session that you and I had together, I have told people, like, if you need professional photos, you call Work Story. Right. I have had that experience with other brands as well. Auto mechanics, personal service providers. I will, if you earn my trust with delivering above and beyond, I will recommend you to anyone who asks. Right. And I think everybody does that. They really, really like to be treated well. They like to get really great service, and they like to share that when they can.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, let's see. We got a couple comments here from Megan. Let's see. She said, I heard the go get 10 no's in previous business models. I'm going to replace that with I'm okay with all responses. Perfect.
Wow. Well, I would add this, like, Megan, what would it be like if you were like, acceptance of everything, but I don't have to agree with it, right? And I noticed from like Megan's profile photo is like she's holding a camera, so I'm going to assume she's a photographer, right? Yeah, so if you're wanting someone to hire you for a job, you probably do think you're the best person for the job. You are, and they might say yes or no. What if you were okay with every single like you're just accepting that, but you don't have to agree with it? Let me go down this rabbit trail of acceptance. I was teaching a workshop once to a group of parents who had kids that had like diabetes and Crohn's and colitis and things like that. So not like terminal diagnoses, but it was a healthcare diagnosis that, you need to deal with for most of your life. And I was teaching this concept that acceptance does not equal agreement. And a parent came up to me afterwards and she said, that is so powerful because it means that I can be okay with what's happening in my kid's life. I can be okay with the fact that they have this disease or they have diabetes or whatever, but I can still fight like hell to give them the treatment and to give them the things that they need, to have an awesome life. And that's really what it is. Accepting a client saying to you like, yeah, you're not the right one. Like, great. And I'm still going to fight like hell to make sure that that next client, or even you who's not hiring me today, might hire me down the road. Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's really powerful.
Yeah. I think I just had this thought, like accepting it, but not agreeing with it, even for yourself, is a huge mindset shift, because you get so many no's and you could start to be like, oh my gosh, nobody's going to pay for this. I'm not good enough or whatever. But being able to be like, okay, they didn't hire me, but I'm still the best. And they should have hired me because I would have helped them, I think that's really powerful.
Well, even going back to the idea or what you were saying earlier about kind of how we have to train ourselves to have sales calls. What if I accepted like, it's uncomfortable for me to make sales calls. I accept that. Don't necessarily and one of the things I could do is be like, you're right. So I'm not going to do it. Or I can accept it and be like, yep, it's uncomfortable. And the way to build my business is to have these conversations.
That's exactly what I did. I was like,
yes,
if I want business, I have to do this. I tried to avoid it for a long time. I was like, can I hire someone to do this for me? Can we only do it via email? But the best way to do it is to get on the phone with people. So that's what I do.
Yeah. You have to have those conversations.
Yeah. Megan says that's how I approach dating too.
I think that's a fantastic approach. Like, okay, it's going to work or it's not going to work. And I may or may not agree with you.
Right. Yeah.
That's great. I've got one more or another improv concept I want to share with you.
Let's hear it.
So, and this is something that I know that you've talked about at Work Story before, is this idea of storytelling, right? There's this structure that we put in improv that is fairly simple, but it all revolves around like the question of what happens next in a story, right? So when you're making something up and you're trying to figure out where's the story going to go, one of the questions is what happens next. And if that's the kind of the question that you're sharing with a client or you're sharing with someone that you're doing improv with, you have an idea of where to go. But the answer to that question, and here's kind of the shortcut. The answer to that question starts with the phrase, because of that, then off you go. So like a story might be once upon a time, princess lived in a castle. And then one day she was, so whatever, the fairy tale thing. And then a lot of stories kind of start following this domino or this linear model of, well, because the princess was banished to a castle, then a prince went on an adventure, then there was a dragon, then this, then this, then this, and then, and then they lived happily ever after. What if you told the story of your business in the same way, right? Like once upon a time, there was someone who needed a service or a product, and there was a service provider or someone that had this product. And because of that, they had this conversation. And this person purchased the product or service. And because of that, they got this. And because of that, they got this. And because of that, they got this. Like, we talk about customer journeys sometimes, or we talk about customer avatars and things like that. I'm curious about, like, I think a lot of customers or clients want to know, like, what's next? Like, what's going to happen next in this story, right? So, and I think a lot of people do a really good job of this, like on our websites and on our media. Like we talk about, like, here's the problem that you have that I can solve for you. And I think the next step in that, into the storytelling part, is, and here's what's next when you do that. So, I'm a photographer. So this is the problem I can solve for you. You need photos. When you get those photos, here's what's going to happen next. They're going to completely revamp your website. It's going to be you're just going to have images that make a huge difference for you and your business. And when that happens, then you're going to start getting this credibility, and people are gonna be like, wow, you really look great. And then when that happens, this, and when that happens, this, right? So one of the exercises I ask some of my coaching clients to do sometime is to write out your story. Like, what's the, once upon a time, this was what was true. And then this service or product showed up, and because of that, this, and because of that, this. And the way that the story ends is you get to a place where you get to say, until finally, one day this happened, right? So using you as a work story as an example, until finally, I redid all of the photos on my website, and I had the most professional, the best looking photos for my business, and people started noticing, looking at my website, started getting more traffic, all these kinds of things. So it's what's next because of that until finally you get this. And that until finally is really what's the ultimate goal that you want to have for someone. Right. So for coaching, it's like until finally you got the transformation that you want to get in your life and your business.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So when I first started my business, I knew businesses needed what I had to offer, but I couldn't vocalize what they were actually getting in the end. Like, it was really hard for me to do that. So I started getting testimonials from people, and I asked them specific questions. I was like, what results have you gotten from using your photos? And then from there, I was able to really see the impact. Some real estate agents are like, somebody saw my picture in a magazine and I got a $500,000 listing from just seeing my picture and saying I looked nice. Or, I took my coaching business from $100,000 to $300,000 in 1 year after I started using your photo, all these tangible things. So, being able to hear it from the client has really helped me be able to tell that story better to people. And then part of what I do at Work Story is help people to be able to show that story, right? Tell the process of what a client goes through and what they get. But I was thinking, I use this as well. A lot of clients comment on, after they go through the whole thing with me, how, they never had a photo shoot before. They didn't know what they should do. And I walk them through every little step. Like, okay, you hired me. Now you sign a contract and pay a retainer. Then we're going to do this planning meeting. I'm going to help you decide what to wear. Where should we do it? How should your hair look? What kind of props should we use? And we just go through the whole thing. And everyone says, wow, like, I was so afraid to have my picture taken, but you made it so easy. It was fun. So that's another step, I think, in walking people through that story. And that's one thing that people love. Like, I've bought services before where it just left me hanging. I'm like, when do we start? What do we do? And if someone has to ask, I feel like I failed. I failed doing my job in walking them through that whole process. So
and that's another part of, like the branding and the identity stuff that you can bring to your business as a business owner, which is, I've got you. Like, I've got you every step of the way, right? Like, especially in things like photography and marketing and stuff like that. Like, there is a level of nervousness. Some people really don't like to have their picture taken. And I would say people don't like to have their picture taken because they've had a lot of bad pictures taken of themselves. Right. But there is some fear there. Right. So if you, as a service provider, as a photographer, can say like, hey, like, I've got you all the way from, I'm going to make sure the lights are good for you, all the way to, like, I'm going to help you decide what to wear. I'm going to help you decide how to stand. I'm going to make you look good. I promise. Right. And then kind of holding their hands every step of the way is just really empowering to people, no matter what your service is. Right. Like, I was hiring somebody recently to work on my sprinkler system because, when we're recording this, it's 1 billion degrees where we are right now. And they were great. They were just like, here's when I'm going to be there. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what you can expect to have done this day. And here's what you can expect to have done this day. And this is probably what you're going to be expected to pay. And I was like, that's great. So I knew when they're, and it's just so freeing to people when you can tell them, like, here's where you fit in the story. Right. This is where you got to show up. This is what you need to do. And I, as a service provider or as a product provider, I'm going to take care of all these other things for you. I talk about this sometime when I talk about improv. I've been doing improv for a long time now, but there's a few people who I know, no matter what happens, like, you can drop me into the middle of a Mars, and I know that they will be great improv partners for me because I know that they have earned my trust and my commitment over time, right? Like that's the goal, I think, as creative business owners, is you want to earn those people where the moment, like in your case, the moment they think of photography for their business, Tanya's the first person we call, right? Work Story is the first thing we call. The moment they think of whatever service you offer, that's the first person that you call. That comes from trust, yes-anding, and putting them in that story.
Right. Well, and it takes time to build that reputation, I think. I teach photographers how to do what I do. And I think when you're first starting out, it can be frustrating. Like, why aren't people hiring me? Or, I'm not sure what to do, that kind of thing. And I tell them, like, just keep going, like do the things I told you to do and then just keep doing them. And over time, you will start to get this reputation, building trust, having people recommend you. Most of my business now comes from referrals or people hiring me again that hired me before. So,
well, and the power of that, and you probably know this too, but like if someone refers you, you're already more than halfway to a sale, right? Like, because that social proof of, hey, I had this thing done for me and it was great and amazing, and I want you to have the same experience. Like, that's how I've hired service providers my mom recently moved here from out of state, and she's like, I need someone to, do some work around my house, or I need someone to work on some things. It was all about like, hey, who has done this service for you before?
Right.
And the people that got the best referrals are the people that got the phone calls. Right. I was going to add something else to that, and I'm sure it was going to be really, here's the other part of it. Is that consistency of showing up. So I tell this story sometime about my kids. So when my daughter was about 6, she was learning to ride her bike. I might have shared this story with you before. When my daughter was about 6, she was learning to ride her bike, and our driveway where we live is pretty steep. So like you can get going pretty quick down the driveway. So she gets up, like we take the training wheels off. She gets up at the top of the driveway and she's like, okay, here I go. So she puts her feet up and she goes down the driveway, and like, she does okay, but she doesn't know how to turn, right? So she just kind of falls off into the neighbor's yard, and I'm like, okay, come on, you can do it. Let's go. So she gets back up and goes down the driveway again and like turns this time, but then doesn't remember how to pedal, and so then falls over in the middle of the street. Right. And this happens like 3 or 4 times, and she's getting really frustrated. And she walks the bike back up to me, and, I'm doing all the stuff that parents are supposed to do. And I'm like, keep going, keep trying. And she says to me, Dad, 100% of the times that I have tried to ride this bike, I have fallen off. Right. And then she goes back inside. I think we have that same attitude about building our businesses or about trying something new. Right. And of course, in that moment, I'm like, oh, you're 6 and like your sample size is skewed. Right. But you can't.
You did it 3 times.
Right. And it doesn't feel that way. You're like, oh my gosh, I've tried this and it's not working. Right. But it's exactly what you were saying, which is, you're probably going to fall down the first 3, maybe even 300 times. Keep going. Keep going. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more quickly your business is going to grow. That's what I tell people who do improv. Like, you can come take like an improv 101 class from me, and that's maybe a couple of months and you'll probably get started. But at the end of it, you're going to be like, I'm not sure I'm a whole lot better, because you might not be.
Right.
So you have to keep going, and if you really have to just invest in it. And the same is true, I think, with growing our businesses.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. My 13-year-old, we've done a couple of voiceover acting classes for him. And I just got him a coach. It's like really expensive, but I'm like, we know nothing about this. Like, if we want to do this, we have to learn from somebody who knows. And the one thing they said is you need to practice reading out loud every day. And it's been hard for me to get him to understand that and do it. And I've gone in with the attitude of, he's 13, maybe by the time he's 20, we'll be able to get him some jobs, So I think that comes from my business background, just knowing like you can't take one class and start booking a bunch of jobs as a voiceover actor, So I think that's such a good principle for people to know.
Well, and there's there's multiple skills that are happening when you're building a business, right? Like, you have to know how to do your job. You've got to know how to take pictures, how to make your clients look really good. But then you also know you have to know the skill of actually running your business.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one's teaching you at the same time that they're teaching you about like shutter speeds and cameras and things like that. They're not teaching you like, and here's how to balance your books and here's how to make sales. Like it's not, like sometimes creative entrepreneurs just think like, I'm just going to show up and people are going to be like, ooh, I'm going to want what you have. But it's a whole different set of skills. The first week that you were learning how to take pictures, like your pictures probably weren't great at the end of the first 5 days.
First 5
well, right, exactly. Or anything. Like my wife is she's a classically trained singer, so she sings opera and recital and things like that. She's been taking lessons and being taught in different ways for more than 25 years, and she's still learning new things about singing, and she's still learning new things about her creative endeavors. The exact same thing is true with your business. Like you, and like for service providers, creative service providers, like you have to be good at your game, right? Like as a coach or as a consultant or as a photographer, and you have to continue to be good at the business of doing your game. So you're right. Like we're never, I can't remember who said this to me. It was a coach, probably a coach that you and I have had in common, but it's like, you're never going to get there because there is no there. Right? Like you're not going to make it because like once you say to yourself, like, well, when I get to like 50,000 a year in sales, then I made it. Well, yeah, but then you're going to get there. Then you're going to say like, well, really, I need 150. Now I need 300. And that's not going to be it. Like you're never going to get there. Same is true when we think about creative things. You know, once I love every single piece of work that I do, then I will have arrived.
Yeah. Cause we're always evolving, right? Like I remember the first time I got paid like $150 to do a photo shoot. I was so excited. I was like, wow, I got paid to do photography. And then eventually like you start doing the numbers and like, I'll have to do 500 photo shoots at $150 an hour per year, you know, to make enough money. So you learn that kind of stuff over time.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think because I have a degree from an art school, graphic design, and I went into that program telling people and with the idea of I want to have my own business. I had 0 business classes, like not a single one. I think that's a missing piece in traditional education for creative people or anyone really. Like if you want to eventually have your own business, that's what I tell creative people now. I'm like, take business classes, get your degree in business. You can always learn how to take photos from, you know, there's a bazillion ways to learn that now, not in college. So that's my little piece of advice for the creative stuff.
No, it's absolutely true. I talk to people all the time. Some of the most brilliant people I know are, you know, brilliant artists, brilliant actors or improvisers or things like that. But no one's ever given them the information that they need to make their business work. Right. And I'll fully cop to the fact that I have tried like 3 different models now in my own business and have had it kind of crash and burn. And it's not because like, well, I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit, honk, but like, I'm a great coach. I'm really great at what I do. I'm really great at helping people see improv and improv theory in their work. And like, even I have struggled with like, oh, how much do I charge and how long is it going to take? And how does it all work? And once I got to the place where I'm like, it's a skill, like riding my bike. And the way that I'm going to get better at serving my clients is to serve my clients. Right. The way that I'm going to get better at writing contracts is to write more contracts. Right. And I think we get really impatient with ourselves. And it might just be like the model that we have set up. And it's like, I can go on the internet and create a website for my business in a day, but it's going to take years and years of running my business for it to get to a place of kind of stability and predictability and things like that. And I don't think we're patient enough.
Well, I think a lot of people give up too soon, right? Like, oh, it didn't work, so I quit, instead of yes-anding it. Like, what could I try now? And that just takes, you know, some grit and commitment to having your business, I guess.
Right. So. The same is true, I think, in improv or any kind of creative pursuit. We want to learn how to play the instrument right now, and we want to go to Carnegie Hall right now. Then rather be like, yeah, it's probably going to take like 30 years of practice before you might even get an audition.
Yeah.
Right. And we're the same way with ourselves and with our business. Like, well, I'm not able to support myself and my family. So I'm just going to throw my hands up and, go back to my job at wherever, Walmart or wherever,
Yeah.
whoever's paying the most right now. I think there's actually, you can make good money being a school bus driver right now. I saw a sign. Woo. But we won't. Like, what if I said to you, like, it's probably going to take 5 years, but in 5 years, you're going to be making enough that you're comfortable and you feel really great about your business, and there are going to be huge opportunities to grow. Would you take that? I think most people would say, like, well, of course. Like, we would think, yes, of course I'll do that. But then if we added, like, but for the next 5 years, it's going to be kind of a struggle, and you're going to have to, like, scrape and make ends meet. Like, I don't know if I want to do that.
Right. Well, I think this is where coaches and mentors come in. Like, it's smart to have someone to help you keep going. And like in the case of my branding photography course, I teach everything that I wish I would have known. Like, I had to discover and invent all of it over like 7 years. And I have like several students who bought the course, never did a branding session in their life, and they booked like 10 in 2 months. And I'm just like, to be able to accelerate that by hiring someone to help, lead the way and encourage you, it's going to accelerate that even faster instead of, slumping through it by yourself. So I think that's a good reason to hire a coach or
totally
or someone to help you through. So
the other thing that I ask people sometimes is, what's the metric or what's the sign you're waiting for that you've made it?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I talked about my wife, who's a singer, and after our kids were little, she went back to singing, kind of as singing and teaching as her full-time work. And so several years ago, she'd been practicing for years and years. And several years ago, she decided to do a recital. It was her first major recital in several years, and worked on it for months and months. Had a big recital. Tons of people came. She had on the beautiful ball gown that opera singers wear and everything. And the next day I was asking her, like, how do you think that went? And she said, I thought I would feel like I'd gotten somewhere. Right. And what we kind of realized in that moment was, no one's going to give you a certificate and be like, congratulations, you're a creative entrepreneur. Here's your license. Right. Or no one's going to give you a certificate and be like, you've made it as a photographer. Here you go. Like, it's not out there.
Yeah.
In the same way that kind of any creative pursuit, you're not going, like, and this is something that I think is true for a lot. There are no gatekeepers, right? Like, people think like, well, I'm not there. Well, where's there?
Yeah.
You're not as good as what, like Ansel Adams? Probably not. But that's not the game you're playing, right? Like, you're not as good as someone who got the cover of National Geographic. Maybe not, but that's not the game you're playing.
Right.
So quit comparing yourself to those people, because, by the way, and I read, so after my wife had that recital, I read an interview with this singer. His name's Thomas Hampson. He's kind of like a famous opera singer, and he grew up around here. And he said that, he has been singing, and he's sung all over the world, like sung at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, all these things. And he talks about how every single day doing his work is like wrestling a bear, right? Like, even after, like, he's sung in the most beautiful and incredible places, he would be considered probably the elite of the elite. And he's like, every day getting up and doing my creative work and putting myself out there, it's the same thing. Yeah. I feel like I'm a fraud. I don't know what I'm doing. No one has any, like, why are these people think I can do this? There's no way I can do it. And all of that goes back to failure. What if you just accepted the fact, like, some days I'm not going to feel like I know what I'm doing.
Right.
Oh, well.
Yeah. That reminds me of The War of Art. Have you read that book?
Yes, Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah, where you have to get up and do the work every day. Like, that's what makes you an artist or a writer or a singer, is just getting up and doing it every day. So I love that book. I was like reading quotes to my husband. He's like, I don't get it. Why is this so amazing? But he's not a creative person. So
it's amazing because of this idea. And I love this idea from that book. The idea of resistance, right? Yeah. And that resistance actually is not an out there thing. Resistance is an in here thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, if I was given a choice, I would probably stay in bed all day and eat ice cream and watch Netflix. Like, if that was my, like, I would. right? It takes something to do things like get up, get dressed, go have the meeting, tell people that you would want to sell them services or whatever.
Right.
Because everything in our makeup, everything in our being is telling us to be safe, right? Yeah. As human beings, like we evolved this sense, like when we were back in the cave people days, like, and you'd hear a twig break, you'd be like, if that's a saber-toothed tiger, I better run or I better like get ready to fight it.
Right.
Which is super helpful. Thank you, like historical ancestors, for developing that. So we lived. But what we have now is we don't know the difference between like a saber-toothed tiger coming to attack us and like having a meeting where we would get to sell our services.
Right. Yeah.
Like our brains do the same thing. Our brains are like, don't stay safe, stay where you are.
Hard.
You know? Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, we got a couple of comments here. So Jason has given you a shout out.
Oh yeah, Jason and I have done improv together before. Jason's an improviser and also a coach as well. He's great.
Yeah, I was recently on his podcast. We had a great conversation about storytelling. So you guys can go look on my Facebook and find that.
Yeah.
And then Megan says, oh, wow, we get better at doing the thing by doing the thing. I am so impatient with myself and just thought about this morning how long I've been at it and still don't feel like I'm getting it. Yeah, totally normal, right? Like totally normal to feel that way. And if you're committed to getting better, you just keep doing it.
Yeah.
So, I love that.
Well, and the question that I think I would like, so many people have that thought that Megan was just expressed, but the question I would ask is like, when are you going to feel like you got it?
Right.
Like, what's it going to take for you to feel like you got it? Because I can sit here and say, Megan, you got it. Like, I've just like, there you go. I can tell you, I'm not a gatekeeper. No one is a gatekeeper. You're the person who has decided that you don't have it. Right. So what would happen if you decided that you did? What would that look like? How would you act if you were like, I've arrived. I'm really good at this. I'm really good at what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine that. I mean, for me, that motivates me to go out and do more marketing and have more sales conversations. Cause I'm like, I am good enough. People pay me for this and I do a good job every time, I know that I decide it and I go out and do the action. So yeah, I love it. Okay. So is there anything else any other principles you want to talk about or,
yeah. So there's this other idea that actually I think fits perfectly into this idea of photography, which is one of the fastest ways to build trust in improv is to do whatever you can to make the people around you look really good. Right. I'm going to misattribute this quote, but there's a quote by an improviser who wrote a book, and he says, if you treat people around you like geniuses and artists, they will start to show up as geniuses and artists. Right. And especially in this idea of being a creative entrepreneur, what would it be like if you treated your clients in a way that they were able to show up as geniuses and artists? As a photographer, what would it be like if someone said to your clients, oh my gosh, the photos you put on your website are brilliant. They completely capture you and your staff. They're amazing, right? Like that's ultimately the goal is to do whatever we can to make other people look good. As a coach and a consultant, my job is to make you look like a genius and an artist and someone who is having transformation in parts of your life and business that you've never transformed before.
Right.
I'm not doing any of it. You're doing it, but I'm just making sure that you have everything you need to get there.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the questions I ask sometimes as a consultant and a coach is, what is the way that I can help this client or this customer look good? And I don't mean that like literally,
right.
But I mean, like, if I treated them as a genius and an artist that they are, how would they start to show up for me in my business?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's my ultimate goal, obviously, is to make people like literally look good.
Right.
And oftentimes we go into the planning meeting and they don't know what they need. They're like, I know we need amazing pictures, but we don't know what that should be. And so that's where I bring in my strategy where, what do you want to communicate? What do you want to make sure people know? And then I tell them like, here's how we can visually represent that. and then make sure they look good in it. They're in a good
Mm-hmm.
pose and the lighting is nice and it's communicating what they want to communicate. So yeah, that is absolutely true.
And what
yeah.
does your service or product do that can make your customer or client look like a genius or an artist or that
Right.
really great at what they do?
Yeah.
How is what you offer the thing that's going to make them look good? The most powerful testimonial I've ever gotten from someone was someone who said, because Kevin was my coach, this is what I'm able to do in my life and my business.
That's
I'm
awesome.
like, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was just there as as a coach or as a consultant. And the same, like we were saying earlier, like the most powerful testimonials you can get is, because Work Story took these photos for me, this is what's happening in my business right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And sometimes, like, I just worked with a team of lawyers, and during that planning meeting, they're like, how do we show that we helped someone, have a resolution to their family problem, or, got a settlement? And I was like, well, what do we want them to feel when they come into your office? People are coming in to sue someone. They're uncomfortable. They're scared. So how can we show that this is a comfortable, safe place, that, the people I'm going to be talking to are trustworthy? So that's what we worked on showing, is what's the experience like when they come into this office.
Right.
And they were like, oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many different ways to make your client look good and show them how, you're going to help them succeed. So I think that's relevant. Especially
in some of the creative kind of work that we do. Like our customers are people like, chiropractors, dentists, service providers who have to be really good at the service that they provide. Right. They don't think about like, what is the copy on my website, telling my potential customers. That's what we get to do as creative service providers, right? And if we come at it from a place of, how can I ask the questions or help them see what's the best thing that they can do to help them get to what they want or help them get to where they want to go, like you're already winning. And even in that, and I was saying this earlier, even in some of these sales calls, even if you're just having some of these conversations, asking those questions that help them see what's possible for their brand or their company or whatever, like even if they don't hire you, you've delivered an amazing experience for them.
Right. Yeah.
Right? That's really important too. That's really key.
Yeah. That's one thing that makes me different from some photographers, I think too, is people will get on a call with a photographer and they'll just be like, what pictures do you need? Like, where do you want me to show up? They just show up to take pictures, where I am taking them through that whole process of a production and helping them decide what, asking them those questions. So,
right.
Yeah,
it's a different approach, right? Like I have people that I work with as consultants who show up to businesses and are like, so what are we trying to teach? Right. Or what do we want your employees to know? And, kind of because of my background in coaching, I'm like, what are you committed to as a company? Like, what do you really, in the same way, like, what do you really need? Or what do you think you need? And how are we going to get, to where we want to go? And it's a different conversation, and it really makes a difference for people.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Where could people reach you if they want some coaching or more information?
Yeah. Well, my website is boldmoveconsulting.com. So www.boldmoveconsulting.com. And I just updated it, of course, like everybody is always updating them. But yeah, so check out boldmoveconsulting.com. I'm actually working on starting, I have a small group coaching program that I'm going to be starting in September that I'm taking some interest for. There's an interest form on my website. People can fill that out if they want to take a peek at that. And then on my website has all my contact information if anybody wants to reach out directly as well. So
perfect. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was such an interesting conversation. Just my brand mind is thinking like, why don't you have a book? Why don't you have a podcast?
We've talked about this before.
It's just like such a compelling concept, I guess, that's not overdone, right? Like this could be so amazing. So, but I know you're busy and it's one of the things you get to eventually, right?
That's exactly right. And the only reason I don't have a book or a podcast is because I haven't made time to make a Pokemon podcast, right. And it doesn't mean I can't. I want to, and I haven't made the time for that to happen yet.
Right.
So
yeah, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it when you get it done. So
awesome. Thanks.
Okay, I will see you later. And
awesome.
Everybody else, if you're watching the replay and have any questions, post them in the comments. I'll make sure Kevin sees them to answer them later. And we'll see y'all later.
Sounds good. Thanks. Bye-bye.